Hello, welcome to the Grow Your Wealthy Mindset podcast, where it is all about helping amazing physicians just like you create a wealthy life free from burnout and with the financial security to practice medicine on your own terms. I'm your host, Dr. Elisa Zhang. Hello, and welcome back to the Grow Your Wealthy Mindset podcast. In last week's episode, I talked about how spending in retirement ultimately determines how much you need to actually retire. At the heart of retirement planning is one core fear, the fear of running out of money. After all, you can estimate your housing expenses, your food expenses, and what you spend on day-to-day living, but there's one category that's incredibly hard to predict, and that's long-term care. No one knows when they'll need it or how long they'll need it for. And that uncertainty is exactly what makes long-term care such an emotional topic. Before we get further into this episode, let's define what we're actually talking about when I say long-term care. Long-term care doesn't just involve nursing homes. It also includes getting help with activities of daily living, including bathing, dressing, eating, toileting, and transferring. It can also include care for cognitive impairment like dementia. Long-term care can happen in several settings outside of nursing homes. It could be at home with home health aides. It could mean going to an adult daycare. It could mean living in an assisted living facility. And of course, it can include skilled nursing facilities or what we typically call nursing homes. The costs vary wildly depending on the location and the level of care. Let's talk about the cost of long-term care. According to Genworth, in 2024, the median cost of a private nursing home room is about $10,646 per month. In high cost of living areas, it can cost a lot more. A private room in a nursing home in San Francisco cost $17,672 per month in 2024. If you're curious to see what costs are around the country, I'll leave the link for the Genworth website that displays these costs in the show notes. Home health aides, adult daycare, and assisted living cost less, but they still definitely don't come cheap, and nor should they. You want high-quality trained people taking care of you when you need that kind of care. But this is where people start to worry. What if long-term care ends up wiping out my nest egg? And unfortunately, that is possible. The uncomfortable reality is that Medicare does not cover long-term custodial care. Medicaid does, but only after you spent down your assets, meaning you have spent your nest egg. People with very little money can rely on Medicaid to pay for nursing home expenses, but people with significant assets have a choice. They can decide to buy long-term care insurance or self-insure, which means paying out of pocket for whatever care is desired or needed. Now, I talked about the cost of being in a skilled nursing facility per month, but the question is, how many months of care would someone actually need? This is where the data becomes reassuring, as well as nuanced. According to the Federal Long-Term Care Insurance Program, 33 months is the average time a FLTCIP claimant receives benefits, which includes covering home care, assisted living, and nursing homes. The mean duration of living in a nursing home before death is 3 months for men and 8 months for women, which means that most people who pay for skilled nursing facilities will pay for it for less than a year. And this is why many physicians reasonably choose to self-insure. That being said, self-insuring isn't risk-free. Of course, really nothing is. Let's talk over some of these risks. One major risk with self-insuring is bad timing. If long-term care costs far exceed your normal retirement spending, you may need to liquidate more of your investments earlier than anticipated. Bad timing would be having to liquidate your investments during a market downturn, selling shares before they had the chance to recover. Another risk is needing long-term care early in your retirement. Most people need long-term care in their 80s, and with the average life expectancy in the United States currently at 79 years of age, That goes along with the data that most people don't stay in skilled nursing facilities for all that long. But there are some people who may need a skilled nursing facility much earlier, even their late 60s or early 70s. If that's the case, then it's before portfolios would have had decades to grow beyond what's needed. Having to withdraw much more than expected early in retirement can permanently change the trajectory of a portfolio. This is similar to the sequence of returns risk, which happens when the market has bad years soon after you retire and when you first start liquidating your portfolio of stocks and bonds. Then there's the risk of needing long-term care for a very long time. Imagine someone who gets dementia in their early 70s but is otherwise healthy. They may end up in a memory care facility for well over a decade. 15 years at a memory care center could cost over $2 million currently. So let's talk a little bit more about long-term care insurance and how it works. Like many insurances, you pay a premium, and if you meet eligibility criteria, the policy pays up to your benefit limit for covered care. The cost of a long-term insurance plan depends on factors like age, health, the coverage amount, and whether or not you include protection for inflation. Generally, buying long-term care insurance in your 50s or early 60s is the most cost-effective. Women tend to pay higher premiums due to our longer life expectancy. According to the 2024 American Association for Long-Term Care Insurance Annual Price Survey, the average annual premium for a $165,000 benefit policy with no inflation protection is $950 for a single male age 55 and $1,500 for a single female at age 55. For a couple where both are age 55, the average combined annual premium is $2,080. When looking at the same long-term care insurance policy, if purchased at age 60, premiums significantly increase. The average annual premium for a single male is $1,200 at age 60 and $1,900 for a single female. A married couple who are both age 60 can expect to pay around $2,600 for a combined yearly premium. This shows that long-term care insurance itself ends up being fairly expensive. So I'm typically a person who does like to buy insurance and protect myself against worst-case scenarios, but there are real risks with buying long-term care insurance. And of course, if you talk to someone selling long-term care insurance, this is not something they're going to discuss with you. A risk whenever you're purchasing insurance is the risk that the company where you purchased the policy goes bankrupt after you've been paying the premium for years. In the case of long-term care insurance, existing policies remain valid as they are protected by state guarantee associations. However, policyholders often face premium increases, reduced benefits, or both, which leads to the real risk of buying long-term care insurance. The insurance company can change the rules at any time as long as they get regulatory approval. One poster on Reddit talked about how the insurance company changed the rules on his mother's policy after 25 years of payments, cutting the benefit in half and doubling the premiums. They ended up canceling the policy without ever having used it. Another issue is getting the insurance company to cover long-term care when you think it's needed, but they don't. This can often happen for home health aides, where the long-term insurance company will say that the person can take care of themselves and don't really need the home health aide. There's also the risk of denied claims or disagreements about eligibility. According to the American Association for Long-Term Care Insurance data, approximately half of people who buy long-term care insurance will end up using their policy, which means that there's another 50% of people who never use their policy. Like the example that we heard from the poster on Reddit, those who don't use their policy may not be because they died before they needed long-term care, but maybe because the policy lapsed due to no longer affording the premiums. The lifetime risk of needing long-term care is quite high. However, given the high cost of long-term care insurance and all the downsides, it's quite likely that someone would be much better off taking what they would pay for premiums towards a long-term care insurance policy and instead investing those premiums so that when the time comes, they can use those investments to pay for any healthcare expenses or long-term care needs. And this is why most physicians are best off self-insuring for long-term care. So who should seriously consider long-term care insurance? In my view, long-term care insurance may make sense for married couples with a retirement nest egg maybe somewhere in the 500,000 to 1.5 million range that don't have a pension. Let's go into my reasoning about this. If someone is single, then they don't need to have long-term care insurance because they can use their nest egg to pay for whatever care they need. And once that nest egg is depleted, if it's been spent on long-term care, then Medicaid will kick in. However, if there's two people living on that nest egg and one spouse needs extended care and drains the portfolio, the other spouse still needs to live. Married couples have this survivor risk. It may make sense for a married couple who has some assets but not quite enough to really self-insure for long-term care to actually purchase long-term care insurance. Another question I've heard is people asking whether they should be buying long-term care insurance for their parents, especially if their parents are falling in the situation I mentioned above, meaning that both couples are alive and they have some assets, but not enough to necessarily self-insure for long-term care. There is actually no financial reason for adult children to buy long-term care insurance for their parents. If you have a parent that needs long-term care, they should really go ahead and pay for it themselves. Once their assets run out, then they'll qualify for Medicaid, and Medicaid will cover the skilled nursing facility. You're better off supporting the other parent financially if needed. Now, some people will think, but I want my parents in a nice nursing home. Well, the truth of the matter is that almost all nursing homes accept Medicaid. So if they go into a skilled nursing facility that they're initially paying for out of their assets, and once the assets run out, the highest likelihood is they'll end up staying in that same facility, but now Medicaid is taking over the payments. Having Medicaid doesn't mean getting substandard care. After all, you don't imagine that a physician who sees a Medicaid patient treats them differently than a Medicare patient versus a private insurance patient. Having long-term care insurance also does not guarantee being in a better facility. In summary, long-term care planning is not about fear. It's about understanding risks, probabilities, and trade-offs. There is no universally right answer. For many physicians, self-insuring is completely reasonable. For others, long-term care insurance provides peace of mind. The goal isn't to eliminate risk. The goal is to manage it thoughtfully. And that's really the case with all finances when it comes to investing and buying insurance products and asset protection. It's like in medicine. We're always balancing risk and benefits and discussing those risks and benefits with our patients. With finances as a whole, it's really just understanding the risks and benefits of different options of how you manage your finances, including whether you choose to self-insure for long-term care or purchase long-term care insurance. I hope this episode was helpful for you. It's something that has been on my mind due to seeing the care that my grandmothers required at the end of their life. Thank you so much for being a listener of the Grow Your Wealthy Mindset podcast. If you would like to go over your investing and discussing the risks and benefits of different investment strategies, I'd love to have that conversation with you. You can set up a Zoom meeting with me at my website, www.growyourwealthymindset.com. That first call is totally free, and many people have found it very useful. Have a wonderful week, and I'll be back next week with another episode of the Grow Your Wealthy Mindset podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, I would love it if you could share it with your friends and colleagues. And now for the disclaimer. I am not a certified financial planner, accountant, or attorney, and nothing I say should be construed as professional investment, tax, or legal advice. This show is primarily for your education and entertainment. I am a physician, but I'm probably not your physician. So if you need any medical advice, please contact your own physician. Thank you.